Hello, all together. My name is Thomas Heine. I will be with Peter Köhne, the co-moderator of this session. Welcome, everybody. I want to share my screen now. You can see the scene driving decarbonization in supply chains. Standardizing the product carbon footprint is a topic of this session. And I think yesterday everybody knows what the IPC report showed. We have still time to act, but time to act is now. Any company can become part of the solution. It needs strong transformation paths and implementation for that. Procurement decisions and supplier engagement programs have a huge leverage, and the production of materials is an important source of greenhouse gas emission. So I think this panel comes to the right time, and I will give you a short overview. Peter and I, we are the co-moderators of this panel, and we are working together as guests with Dr. Verena Buback from Merck Group, with Alessandro Pistillo from BASF, and I have to excuse Robert Kreische, who is falling ill this day, but I will take over his part as I can, so that I can. We have this this agenda this day. After a short opening, we will introduce ourselves, and then we have the presentation of Robert, of Alessandro, and of Verena. And after that, we have 20 minutes for Q&A, so we can speak together. I wish you a good time for you, and I ask you, who are you, and please, can you tell me something about you, and can you give an introduction to you? Peter?
Yeah, good day, everybody. My name is Peter Köhne. I'm a Chief Procurement Officer with SPIRA, that is sustainable rolling products of aluminium, and also co-chair of the German chapter of Sustainable Procurement Pledge, so SPP. And as you are probably aware, within the Sustainable Procurement Pledge, we like to raise awareness for sustainable procurement. We like to really inspire people to keep updated on sustainable procurement, and also inform people about sustainable procurement. And especially, it's important that we network together and all understand what leverage we have as procurement department to influence sustainable procurement, and also, of course, the carbon footprint. And for our German chapter, we like to focus, of course, on Germany, and in Germany on the big companies, but also on the medium-sized and small companies. So with that, I like to give over to Verena, and like to introduce Verena to you. Verena?
Thank you, Peter, and welcome everybody from my side. I'm very excited to be here today and join this session. I'm Verena Buback. I'm head of sustainable procurement at Merck. Merck is also a champion of SPP, and so I'm very excited to be joining this session. As Peter already said, procurement plays a super critical role in driving sustainability for the whole company, and that's part of what I do in my role, really embed sustainability into our supply chain. And of course, reducing the greenhouse gas emissions in our supply chain is really critical, and a lot of the emissions stem from the purchased goods and services that we procure. So that was why I was so keen also to collaborate closely with Together for Sustainability, TFS, and join their Scope 3 greenhouse gas program as a co-chair. And I'm very happy today to speak especially on how this PCF guideline can be rolled out in your company and in your supplier base. So I guess, Alessandro, over to you.
Thank you, Verena. And my name is Alessandro Pistillo. I'm also thrilled to be here. I work for BASF, and working in the corporate development department, responsible for digital initiatives. One of these dealing with creating transparency in the carbon footprint of our products. That's the link to what we will be discussing today. But I'm very proud to be also a member of the mentioned organization and initiative Together for Sustainability, which is driving standardization in this field, in the chemical industry space. More about this in the next minutes, and hope to have a lot of questions from you and have a lively discussion in the Q&A session.
Okay, thanks, Alexandro, very much. Before going on, we have a small poll. Peter, can you put it to the screen?
Do you see this, the poll?
I don't.
Yeah.
Yes.
So please vote. That looks good. Votes coming in. That's a good mix. Seems to be very balanced. Okay, I think we come to an end, and it's very balanced. Oh, sorry. Thank you very much for that, and yeah, very balanced community. Thank you very much.
Okay. So I will take over, and we'll go to the presentation. So please, I don't be Robert Kreische. I'm Thomas Heine, the moderator, but because he is fallen ill, I will go into his presentation. He gave me a text. I will read this text, and but I think it's really good because it's a good input for the beginning of this session. Robert is working with Dr. Schnell, that is a medium-sized company, broad spectrum of products, mainly in kitchen and facility and institutional training. Compared to production volume, very high amount of sales articles, the biggest trend, as in so many areas, is sustainability. What is truly sustainable? There is a wide range of different raw materials with the claim sustainable at the market, most with renewable sources, but they are often used in this way. Here, for example, with surfactants, simple add, middle, or a higher amount used in the formulation right. Wait a moment. Okay. Are bio-based ingredients always more sustainable? Here's a little example. I can hear my voice. Okay. On the left, you see a sanitary cleaner, which is fully fossil-based. On the right, a cleaner of raw materials, which are almost complete renewable carbon. Same performance, same raw material costs. Which of the cleaners is better in terms of environmental impact? The solution to this problem can be found in the PCF. The problem is consulting companies sometimes charge 5-digit amounts for the calculation of the PCF of a sales item, often a poor quality. And he said to me that in this company they have more than 500 products what they are buying, and so this will be a really high problem. So how did they go on? With the help of a small amount of available manufacturer data and using databases available online, which are automatically obtained via an Access database it was possible to calculate for each of the 500 raw materials and 2,000 packing materials according to the cradle-to-grave principle. The calculations were certified according to ISO 14067. This ISO standard is already a good basis for the comparability of PCFs, but it still leaves some room for interpretation, such as cut-off criteria and the problem of biogenic carbon. There is a risk of a calculation race here between the manufacturers. The ERP software from Dr. Schnell calculates the current PCF from the parts list. The sales figures can be used to calculate the company's daily CO2 balance and the savings achieved compared to last year. This ensures that the reduction efforts carried out are also reflected in reality. Okay, so far. Alessandro, it was my introduction to this. We saw the view of a small and medium-sized company to this. And if I heard the first time from your guide, from TFC guideline, I thought, oh, Robert, I have imagined Alessandro before because he could help you. So please, it's your time.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. And well, of course, a pity that Robert is not here today with us. And here, the challenge he has been facing firsthand. Well, let's make one step back, right? As you were positioning the topic at the beginning, it's basically a necessity and a strategy of every company right now, manufacturing company, to deal with the decarbonization strategy. And there is no way to execute a decarbonization strategy without having clarity and transparency of where you stand, right? What is the carbon footprint of your product? What is the carbon footprint of your manufacturing? And I mean, here we are surely with a large audience of procurement colleagues, and the challenge that everybody shares here, so every company, is the management of the so-called scope 3, so the emissions embedded in the raw material, which make up for, depending on the company, very often the most significant portion of the carbon footprint of the final product. We are talking about 70, 80, 90, some companies even 95 or 99% of the average carbon footprint of a manufactured good is eventually scope 3. So how to get hold of this scope 3 and how to manage it effectively? Basically, you need data, and it was definitely a pioneering work what Dr. Schnell has been doing and showing in this slide, calculating product carbon footprint for their detergents products that they manufacture. But they were facing a lot of challenges, right? So they needed to have product carbon footprint data about all the ingredients, several hundreds, you were saying, right? Several hundreds of ingredients which go into this final formulation. And Robert's challenge was to say, well, how can I now compare this formulation, so this cleaning formulation, with this other cleaner based on a sustainable raw material? How can I decide whether the one option is better than the other in terms of cost and in terms of emission performance? And here it comes the challenge of getting, first of all, of getting data from your supplier, and then having meaningful data. You saw from the example that sometimes you may even jump to the wrong conclusions based on average data or average product carbon footprint that you find in data banks. You need to have data from your suppliers. You want to have the possibility to select one supplier or the other supplier based on the one which offer the best profile, right, in terms of cost and price performance, right, but also in terms of emission performance. And this is a challenge which, as I was saying, every company is facing, including the company I belong to, BSF. And I mean, I can even give a spoiler. Obviously, Verena is also facing the same challenge. So how to enable the supply chain to determine product carbon footprint accurately and according to a common standard, and how to ensure comparability of product carbon footprint. So how to ensure that I can select my raw materials based on an apple-to-apple comparison. And here there was definitely a need, which was still unmet, in defining a standard, right, a guideline to help company to determine product carbon footprint in a accurate and also in a comparable way, and also put aside the uncertainty, right, that you may have in certain value chain. Okay, I can calculate the product carbon footprint in this way or in this other way. Which method should I choose? Therefore, the chemical industry joined forces in the frame of the initiative Together Sustainability, which was mentioned before, and which I have also the honor also to co-chair together with Verena with respect to their greenhouse gas management program. And Together Sustainability issued last year a specific standard for chemical raw material, which defines how carbon footprints of chemicals, all sorts of chemicals, no matter if they go into a detergent, like the case of Robert, or in going to a pharmaceutical product, or going to an automotive part. So how to determine carbon footprint in an accurate way. So you put aside, you eliminate the topic of uncertainty, how should I calculate the carbon footprint? But at the same time, since the guideline is more specific than generic standard out there, like the ISO standard or the greenhouse gas product protocol, or even the PEF method, it's basically a very accurate and specific standard, which delves into the special issues of chemical manufacturing. So addressing the topics like biogenic content, mass balancing, carbon capturing use, carbon capturing storage, and many other aspects and technologies which are typical in a chemical manufacturing space. So the outcome and the feedback that Together Sustainability has received in the last months has been tremendously positive, because many companies now have the certainty about how to determine carbon footprint, and they can also rely on a standard and not perhaps being forced to calculate the product carbon footprint in different ways, because one company is asking to calculate according to one method, another one has another method, and another one asks for an additional data point which the other suppliers is not asking for. It's creating so clarity, and it creating structure, and eventually is reducing efforts also for company like Dr. Schnell and many others to determine carbon footprints in a standardized fashion. That's in a nutshell the reason, the why, and the purpose for determining the product for launching from Together Sustainability side a guideline for product carbon footprint determination. I will be happy to address questions in the next section, but I think that perhaps to get the ball rolling, it would be great to have Verena now on stage to describe, okay, now we have a guideline, we have a standard, how do we roll out, how do we implement a program in my company to enable my suppliers to calculate carbon footprints in a standardized fashion.
Okay,
Verena, you want to show perhaps and share your direct experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for outlining all the benefits this standard brings to us in quantifying in a comparable manner the product carbon footprint data for different chemicals, and also for really making sure that we can compare this data then across the industry and with our customers, with our suppliers. It's critical to, let's say, unleash the full potential to really now roll it out, use the guideline in our own companies, and then also cascaded upwards and downwards our value chain. So I would start with saying we should probably all follow Dr. Schnell's great role model and start calculating the product carbon footprint for our products. That would be so wonderful. And of course, that means, first of all, you need to understand who are the people in your organization who do these calculations. Maybe they are in a central team where you have bundled the expertise. Maybe they are located more closer to the products in your different business units. That really depends on your company setup. But these people will be super interested in understanding and reading Chapter 5 of the guideline to really have this details and the guideline itself, how to calculate product carbon footprint and how to adhere to these standards that Alessandro just outlined. Probably you will also have a benefit if your sales teams, the teams that talk to your most important customers, have a rough understanding of the value that this guideline offers. Because when you then in future share the product carbon footprint data to your customers, you can have them explain to which standard it is calculated, that the data is really reliable and comparable, and and that will definitely bring also then more credibility to the data that you will share in future. So, but of course, this is just the customer-facing side that is super critical. It will not yet help us tackle the emissions upstream in our supply chain. For this, you will probably talk to your department, maybe a corporate department, that's reporting your corporate carbon footprint. And probably, as Alessandro outlined, they will tell you, oh, there are a lot of emissions in 3.1, purchase goods and services. And probably this department currently has a way of estimating these emissions, maybe on spend, maybe on volume based. But what they probably ask you is, can I get primary data from your suppliers? And so for this, they will be interested to reading Chapter 4 of our PCF guideline, because here it tells them exactly how to integrate then the supplier provided product carbon footprint data. And this will help you more accurately report on the 3.1 emissions, your overall scope 3 and overall corporate carbon footprint emissions. And this will also then tell you exactly how are you making progress on your decarbonization journey. Yeah, and then finally, of course, definitely not least, we need to definitely involve procurement. And that's also then part of my team's role and my colleagues' role, because we need to talk with our suppliers and ask them to provide us the product carbon footprint. And as a great help, we can provide to them the trainings and the resources available around the product carbon footprint guideline by TFS. We can share with them the guideline. It's open source, so you can download from the website, and also the other resources, the trainings and guiding materials. And so they can calculate for the raw materials that you purchase the product carbon footprint and share it to you in a way that you can better rely on, and you can compare, as Alessandro said, to your other raw materials. And this will really help you then understand which suppliers are really making a lot of progress, which raw materials have a lot of carbon footprint, and you may want to think of finding alternatives and work more closely with these suppliers. So in enabling your procurement team to really help suppliers and explain to suppliers about this guideline, and then ideally even your direct suppliers, talk again to their suppliers and cascade down the product carbon footprint standard into the supply chain. This will totally then increase transparency and comparability of the data that we will be sharing alongside the products that we are already sharing. So that's from my perspective as a start, and I think we should really get into a good discussion now. So I'd be happy to also take questions and have a lively discussion with my colleagues here on stage.
Okay, Verena, thank you very much, and also Alexandro for your deep insights into the topic, and also what is this this guideline and how to implement this guideline. It was really, really interesting, and I think there's a lot of questions. Oliver, do you see some questions that we can put here?
I can take that one. Interesting question, first of all. So it reads, can the standard TÜV sustainability standard apply to other sectors? I would say that, as I was outlining at the beginning, that one of the benefits and the value behind the TÜV sustainability standard is its specificity for the chemical industry. So if you are operating in the chemical value chain, the TÜV sustainability guideline is definitely something for you. And or if you are purchasing products with a product carbon footprint, of course, from chemical manufacturers, you can ask the company to use that guideline or that methodology to calculate product carbon footprint. With that being said, with adaptation, it's possible to have a similar approach or a similar guideline for other sectors. So I would say that the answer to this question is no and yes. No, in the sense that as it is actually perfectly tuned for chemical manufacturing setting. But yes, it can be adapted into a methodology which can be used also in other sectors which are different than chemicals.
Can I add, as Merck is obviously making chemicals, but we're also active in the life cycle, life science and healthcare area. So definitely, I would say it's not the pure chemical industry, but it's really also the neighboring industries that, at least as you said, Alessandro, deal with chemicals. So for instance, the pharma industry, for everything that's using a molecule, you can already use it. So I think not limited completely to the pure chemical industry. I try to be a little more inclusive here. I hope that helps.
Absolutely, and actually, it's you prompt me another comment here, Verena. The TÜV sustainability guideline is designed as what we call it a drop-in sectoral guideline for chemical raw materials, exactly. Meaning that the guideline can be applied to determine the product carbon footprint of a chemical or pharmaceutical product, irrespectively if this chemical will be then eventually used for manufacturing an item of a fast consumer good equipment or electrical equipment or a car part or a cosmetic product. Fundamentally, the approach is the guidelines is flexible to be adopted to calculate the carbon footprint of chemical, irrespective of the application is it going to.
Yeah, let's take maybe an example here. Let's take automotive. Obviously, they're not chemical industry, but there may be some purchased goods and services that are, or purchased goods rather, that are actually chemicals. So maybe then they don't use Chapter 5 of our guideline because their products are not a chemical and they would not need a PCF calculation for their products, but they would certainly be interested in using Chapter 4, how to integrate the PCFs provided by their suppliers for maybe certain coatings or chemicals that go into then their production.
Yeah. Let me also go one step back. I think it's very important that TFS is an initiative which was brought together from one industry. So if you're in a different industry, I think it's very wise to say what kind of community initiatives are already existing on sustainable procurement or can be generated to have the same interest and then work on this kind of standard. And I think then it's very helpful to look into these TFS standards and say, okay, how can we adapt that to our industry? How can we use that going into the next step?
I want to add that the Association of of Machinery and Equipment Manufacturers published 2 months ago also a guideline for this branch. So we can see this is your TFS makes the first step, but now the others are following, and this is really interesting. I have a question to Verena and Alessandro. How is the relation from the TFS guideline to the ISO standards and greenhouse gas protocol standards?
Yeah, it's of course, and that's a recommendation for any initiatives which is starting to develop perhaps some standards. Do not reinvent the wheel, right? So if there is something already out there, leverage what is out there and build on top of it. Together Sustainability Guideline is in fact developed on top of the mentioned ISO standard from 14067 and the greenhouse gas product protocols standard. But it went then one level deeper, as I was saying, right? So to add the specificities which are typical of a chemical or pharmaceutical manufacturing setting. So that's the added value in the guideline of Together Sustainability. But again, this standard is not ignoring, actually is building on top of these generic standards.
Okay. Are there any other questions, please? Oliver, can you help? What other platform used to collect the data from suppliers?
I can comment on that one. So we basically, you can use any platform, and it's on your company to see how you have set up your supplier program. And maybe you sign up to certain sharing platforms. Maybe you have your own tailored approach to exchange data with suppliers. So that's nothing that in the past we have somehow mandated, let's say, from our industry perspective in TFS. What we really worked on when we developed this product carbon footprint guideline, first of all, is that we wanted to ensure we all calculate according to the same standard, so that the calculation results make sense and are comparable. The calculator can be chosen by the company itself, and it's free at their discretion, basically. What we are working on now in Together for Sustainability is, of course, to also help now data sharing, and we're working on a data sharing IT solution, but that's still in development. But the idea would be that in a very safe, very confidential way, then the PCF data could be shared amongst TFS members. But that's so far not something that is a solution that everybody will benefit from. But the PCF guidelines, so the ensuring that the data that you calculate with the tool that you choose is comparable, that's an open source support material that we have developed. And then you can decide whichever is the best way to share data with your suppliers. Alessandra, you have, I think, with BASF a clear approach how you collect the data, right? Maybe that's a good role model as well.
Yeah, it's a good good introduction. Indeed, BASF has been developing also digital solution to manage the incoming product carbon footprint data from our supplier, and of course enrich or complete the data input with secondary data whenever primary data is not available. And the situation today is very often so that you don't have primary data for product carbon footprint for all your raw materials. So that's the way the approach that we are following, and many companies are following this approach. We see, however, a potential of improvement in this approach, because what happens in a situation like this? Yeah, guess what? Then you have a customer A asking data in one fashion, customer B asking the same piece of data with some other type of questionnaire, customer C having another creative manner to request data, and this generates, at the end of the day, at scale, a multiplication of efforts and disorient somehow the suppliers. For this reason, actually, Verena was mentioning, Together Sustainability is now working on a joint IT platform, which will standardize not only the way that product carbon footprint are calculated, that's the open source platform, the open source guideline that we were referring to before, but also provide the tools to exchange in a standardized fashion, so standardized exchange mechanisms between companies or between suppliers and customers. And that platform, indeed, it will be tested initially among TFS members. TFS as an organization, as an initiative, encompasses, in the meantime, 43 large, but also some mid-sized companies in the chemical, plastics, and life science space. But this platform will be also opened up and available in mid-short term also to other companies. Of course, also all the suppliers to the TFS members. So fundamentally, with that platform, TFS will also provide an additional tool to simplify the exchange of data and the proliferation of primary data in the chemical value chain, and all the value chains which use chemical raw materials to manufacture some other goods.
I have another question. The question is belongs to this audience from 40% of our audience who has not yet started with PCF. What are, please, the advantages of going the first step into PCF?
Should I start?
Yes, please.
So I don't think the PCF is the first step. So I don't know to exactly where you are on your journey. If you have started your decarbonization journey, I would quickly outline. So first of all, you need to think of, do you want to set maybe emission reduction target for your company? And for that, you need to first create transparency on the emissions right now. So that's the first step. Then you can think of, do you maybe want to sign up with the Science-Based Target Initiative or any other credible initiative that validates that the reduction targets that you set make sense. And then you will need to analyze, how do you best reduce emissions? So you will understand, where do your emissions stem from? And probably, as Alessandro already outlined in his first part of the session, you will find that a lot of your emissions come from purchased goods and services. And then you will realize, as long as you stick to reporting, which is great at the beginning, with globally available emission factors that are maybe based on spend or weight or volume, these come from global databases. But they will not reflect if one of your supplier has taken great measures to reduce emissions. So you will get overall an understanding where you stand. You will get overall an understanding where your hotspots are based on the products that you procure. But you will not be able to show really reduction effects that are translated to you because your suppliers have taken reduction measures. And that's obviously something that you want to reflect if you want to show decrease of emissions. So you have to go at that stage then to get primary data from your suppliers. And you will then discover that the product carbon footprint is just the most reliable way to calculate really the actual emissions that have occurred in manufacturing the product that you procure. But it's not the first step. So there are several steps before, and you need to take really one step at a time. And also, maybe let me say this as well. I would not advise to now ask every supplier to provide you with a product carbon footprint, because we need to understand our suppliers are our partners, and they are equally on their own individual decarbonization journey. So you will definitely have some suppliers that are much more advanced than yourself, like we have as well, and then you can learn from them. You will find some suppliers that are about at the same pace as you are, the same maturity level. You can exchange best practices and help each other out. And then there will also be some suppliers who are just starting, maybe like you are now, or maybe like you were a few years ago. And then they need to also walk these steps. They need to first understand where they are right now, what are their current emissions, where could be reduction levers be taken, and only then they reach the level of saying, now I'm in a position to calculate product carbon footprint. Because it's quite complex. If it was easy, there would have been no need to create this PCF guideline.
Yeah, these are really wise comments, the ones from Verena, and I would say that if I can add something, first of all, there is not one single route which leads to Rome, right? So you have different routes that you can take. Certainly, at some point, especially depending on the industry where you are active, any company will have to determine product carbon footprint, because your customers or the customers of your customers will ask that. So there is no time to lose in that sense. So if you want to start the process, you should definitely start the process as fast as possible. And the one first step will be also to assess how much of the emissions are coming from your own manufacturing operations or from the purchasing of an energy, and how much is coming from the raw materials that you purchase. So this first assessment is crucial at the beginning. Again, the scope 3 is a special case, and can be addressed in the way which we outlined at the beginning of this session. The scope 1 and 2 would require for you, also for any company, to get an understanding of what are the emission driver in my manufacturing, right? So you will have to get to some type of asset level or plant level emissions in order to understand what is driving the emissions that you are generating while producing your goods. So that's definitely a key step, and you will ask yourself, which type of standards should I choose also to calculate product carbon footprint? And that's where, if you are operating the chemical industry, the guideline of TFS comes very handy. And last but not least, you will probably recognize that calculating product carbon footprint one by one manually is something which is very, very time consuming, and in the long run, very, very costly. So you will realize that you need some level of automation and some IT tools to calculate product carbon footprint. And the example of Robert today is a wonderful example of a small and medium enterprises going that route that early. But in the meantime, there are many products which allow to, IT products will allow to calculate product carbon footprints, even in the most complex manufacturing setting that you may have. So depending on where you are in your stage, you will have different needs, but definitely one message: no time to lose. Deep dive into it, because sooner or later, either your customers or perhaps even the regulators will force you to into that direction.
Yes, of course. I have another question. Sometimes it's you need to, if you want to convince your boss, you need financial arguments. if there is there a method of measuring the carbon emissions in the supply chain?
I mean, there are ways to get to this type of assessment. I mean, and the data banks, secondary data banks we were mentioning, are definitely providing a lot of insights. They do not tell you that that supplier is better than the other, but they will give you some ideas about where the emission drivers are in the value chain. If you don't have capability, LCA capability in-house, you may also get, for some strategic questions like the one you ask, also help from an LCA consulting company. That's something that is always possible to do. But at the end of the day, it's important to, as I was saying, to deep dive into it and get real first-hand understanding of how a company, me as a company, can reduce the carbon footprint of my goods. Because let's face it, at the end of the day, perhaps your customers, as some of our customers are already doing, are not only asking for a product carbon footprint information, but consider this an important procurement criteria, right? So having this piece of data early and have an understanding how this is calculated and how I can influence it by improving my manufacturing, improving my electricity purchase, improving my raw material purchase, is a fundamental source for competitive advantage in the future.
Yeah, I would also add, I think you're touching on a very critical point that's brought up to me as long as I have this job, basically. So there's always this fear, oh, the more sustainable raw material will be so much more expensive, and it is the case in some cases, but it can also be sometimes cheaper. But of course, in any way, I think we're all clear that a transformation usually comes at a price. And I think the calculation that you need to do is, what is the price if I don't change? What is the price if I do nothing? And then my emissions will just grow because my company will grow. At the same time, we'll have much more legislation around sustainability, we'll have much more customers, we'll have much more shareholders interested in buying sustainably, buying sustainable products, investing in more and more sustainable companies. What is the price? What is my business value if I don't follow this? And probably you'll come to the conclusion it's what you have to do if you want to stay in business. And so what a lot of companies are thinking about, some have already implemented, is techniques or measures to compare sustainability value a bit more to a financial value. And one measure is what some companies put into practice is so-called internal carbon price. So you can, for instance, say a ton of CO2 I define costs so and so much, and you can choose if this is €100 or just 50 or 250, and then of course you can also define if you want to use it as a steering element or more as an information element. That's up to your company how you want to drive this, but at least it could give you a slight comparison, because then you can calculate the emissions of your regular product plus the price tag, and then the emissions with this internal carbon price multiply, and then you get an additional price tag in euro or whatever currency is, and add this to the regular price. And so that should at least bring some comparability of the more sustainable product and the regular product on the CO2 level included into the financial evaluation.
Oh, thank you very much, Verena. It was really interesting, and I think it's are the main arguments. Oliver, are there other questions in the chat?
Yeah, that's of course an interesting question, and there is not a single answer to this, obviously, right? How long does it take to calculate the product carbon footprint? it's very strong depends on 3 factors, I would say. How far you are in the journey. So do you have already clarity on the carbon footprint of your assets, or the emissions of your assets, for example? Do you have an understanding of the carbon footprints associated with the raw materials? Do you have access to secondary data bank already, and you're familiarized with that, and so on and so forth? So many factors, but as well also important to know how complex is your operation. Do you have 10 products? Do you have hundreds of products? Do you have thousands of products? With that in mind, as said, I would in all cases really recommend, especially in the time and the urgency we are today, not to go one product at a time, but let's say try to have a comprehensive and cohesive approach that allow you to calculate the carbon footprint of all your products in the same fashion. So going towards automation, it can be as quick then as a few months to get hold of product carbon footprint of your entire manufacturing portfolio, especially if you have a small manufacturing setup, not so many products, and if you have good data then about your emissions at asset level. But it could also last a couple of years if you are if at the very beginning of the journey, and if you have a very large and complex manufacturing setup. So it depends really. You can understand that there is a good reason to get the process started in order to be able to calculate the product carbon footprint of your entire portfolio as soon as possible.
Okay, is there another question? One question that I saw in the chat, perhaps for the last two minutes, before we make a break in the discussion, are there any tools who helps you measuring the PCFs data?
Yeah, there are many tools available, to be very honest, right? So if you Google it, you will find quite dozens of entry points. There are, I think, different tools for different situations. If you are a small enterprises with only scope 3, you're just assembling stuff, right? Or some simple mixing process. You can choose almost also very simple tools for that, right? So, or you can also even make one yourself, like Robert did as a pioneering person. If you have a complex setup, if you want to fully leverage your ERP systems or ERP system to get the data in an automated fashion and then calculate the carbon footprint very quickly in a wash and without too much human intervention, then there are, of course, other more sophisticated enterprise solutions which can be also sourced in the market. If you are interested in the solutions which are adopted in the chemical space, you can reach out to Verena or myself, and we can also provide you some indications for this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think most of the suppliers or providers of tools will flag our tool is comparable to this ISO norm, or some even flag we are complying with the TFS PCF guideline. So this would also give you then an indication what level of specificity you need for your tool, and if the tool can provide you the accuracy that you're looking for.
Yeah,
Okay.
let me add a final poll here to have a good wrap up plan. And by that, I like to add from my point and wrap a little bit up. So what I heard here, beside all the details, is definitely that you need to start if you haven't started yet. So that's, I think, very important. You need to design your own project. Yeah, you need to find your own way for your company, for your industry to move on. I think we all, and you should be aware of, you can only manage what you can measure. Yeah, so therefore data are key. And what I also heard is that that is a very good advice to use calculation tools, digital tools to help you with the measuring. And then please network, because with networking and also participating in days like today in the sessions, you might get the additional tips to move on.
Jose, Peter, thank you very much for the summary. And Verena and Alessandro, thank you very much for your willingness to offer us a deep insight into this matter. We can go on with the discussion. I will put it, where is I? Okay. There who are interested, I give you some hints what you can do. You can continue to conversation in our in the lounge, or you go directly to the tfsinitiative.com, and you can examine there the outline, the PCF guideline for your company or for your industry. I thank you very much for your interest. We have only 1 minute. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Verena. And thank you, Alexandro. For me, it was really interesting, and it was really a deep dive into this topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.